Hello and welcome to Noises Were Made, a music-based show connecting our passions in life with the people who make it happen. Thank you so much for joining us again on another episode. It's going to be a good one today, looking at AI music. What's it all about? Why is it in the press at the moment? Does it impact the music industry significantly? Or does it perhaps just impact the industry who control the money, as in the big Universal Music Groups, etc. of this world? Let's get into it. Before we look at the main topic today, which is about AI, I just wanted to raise a little bit of music news that I just thought was interesting coming in today. 26th of April, 2023, for those of you who are listening at a different time. But the news particularly is, I'd say, music-centric, because Freddie Mercury's goods, some of his personalised treasures, are going up for auction. And his friend, Mary Austin, who had these for many, many, many years, is finally putting them up for sale. And closing that part of her chapter, she has the memories, wants someone else to enjoy it, which is fantastic. But what I thought was quite interesting is one of the items, the lyrics and some of the outline sketching associated with "We Are the Champions" and the song. And they're predicting maybe £200,000-300,000 as something for that, which does seem quite a lot of money. But for such an iconic song, where does is it the rights that you're buying in that? Because surely the record companies have that. So what you're actually buying is the actual piece of history itself. So I was curious what all of you think. So drop some comments, reach out to us on social media, and let us know what you think about that. Should that be something that is sold? Is that something that should be preserved? Or where does that sit in the great scheme of things? I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. But let's get stuck straight into the main event today, shall we say, which is AI and music. So for those of you who don't know, AI means artificial intelligence. And a lot these days is centered around, say, ChatGPT or other systems that have been programmed. The idea being use computers that have some sort of form of intelligence that's been pre-programmed into them. And that intelligence itself is used to then solve other problems and do something in a also process-led way, and using a learned intelligence, or a given intelligence rather, should we say, that enables us to solve things quicker, or solve things that we might deem arbitrary, and then we can focus on the bigger picture stuff. So you could argue that AI could be a calculator if you put a program into it, or an Excel spreadsheet, as an example, if you had it running its own code. But in these instances, they're obviously looking in much more depth, and AI into music is an interesting avenue, because we're then looking at something that's taking creativity into account. Rather than simply let's solve a problem, it is let's look at a pattern perhaps, or let's look at a way in which we can create something that would be pleasing. So for those of you who aren't familiar with 251, for example, play an instrument, that is 135s, 251s, 145s. They're all different types of chord progressions, and they're very, very common in lots of music. Certain people have gone on to say that with 4 chords or with a certain pattern, you can pretty much create most pop songs, or etc., etc., which, it may be true to a certain extent. But as we know, there's a lot more that goes on in terms of creating a song or creating music itself, and a soundscape. So how would AI approach that? And the results so far have been to, as you would imagine with a robot, they will look at something a human has done and copy it and sample it, very much like lots of artists, say hip-hop genres, etc., have sampled things and then brought it forward into something more current. Let's take, for example, some of the stuff that was done by P. Diddy and used the Police music, for example, Vanilla Ice, Queen. There's lots of examples where samples have gone in through music in sort of modern music. And AI is just simply doing the same thing. The reason that it's come into the foray, or come into our tabloids, I think is probably the best way to put it, is because two big artists from Universal Music Group have had their music sampled and put together. And the resultant track was written by, or put out there by someone called Ghostwriter. And the track was Heart on My Sleeve. And it was like an AI remixed song. That's what it's meant to be. So without ado, I'll place a little bit of it to you now and let me know what you sort of think of this.
I came in with my ex like Selena, the flex, bumping Justin Bieber, the fever and left, she know what she need, or she blessed, giving me my best, got my.
So that's just a small clip from the song, say Ghostwriter, Heart on My Sleeve, and apparently Drake and The Weeknd, it's an AI kind of hash up. Now, not two artists that I've listened to a lot of their music, I have to admit, but have listened to some of their songs. Obviously, it's very difficult not to. They're both prolific artists, and it's very interesting what Universal have done. So they've initially gone straight out the gate and tried to make sure that any platform that does streaming, such as Spotify mainly, or the other music streaming platforms, that they get rid of it. Now the question is, why would they do that? What is the reasoning for it? And you really have to look back at how Universal get their money and why it's such a important thing for these huge groups. So going back from our previous episode when we looked at the end of music and the article written by Ethan Iverson, the big record companies historically had control over the distribution, the marketing, the branding, everything. We've changed that now through the advent of the internet and the freedom of information and how everything's digital, and it's easy there's a fluidity to things now, which then creates its own problem associated with intellectual property and who owns the rights and licensing, etc. So Universal generated almost 1 billion streaming in their subscription stuff from and that's Q3 last year, and that's sort of like a 13% growth when you look at what they're doing now. Universal obviously do publish music themselves, but they also record music and have it streamed. Then they have total recorded music, which is necessarily not streamed. And when you look at the quarterly results of Universal, it's quite interesting. You see how much money we're talking about here. So when they are looking at aggressively going after things such as this AI clip, it's not so much necessarily about that one clip, which we will come on to, but there is a greater pot involved. They're trying to, rightly so, make sure that they keep a hold on what's important. Now, in their statements, what they've actually said, one of the things they've said, to use their wording, is what stakeholders in the music industry have to understand what side of history they want to be on. Do they want to be on the side of the artists, the fans, and the human creative expression? Or do they want to be on the side of deepfakes, fraud, and denying artists their due compensation? This instance demonstrates why platforms have a fundamental legal and ethical responsibility to prevent the use of the services in the ways that harm artists. Now, I want to say let that sink in for a moment, but this is from Universal Music Group, who are, arguably one of, if not the biggest, musical groups in the industry. Lots of clout, lots of artists, lots of revenue, all relying on this aspect of the music ecosystem. So the question would be, what would happen if all of these artists decided that Universal, or whichever their label might be, let's not just pick on Universal, there's plenty others out there, what if they decide that they can't protect them for this anymore? and they leave and decide to set up their own studios or go independent. They've got their own following. They've got their own masses of groups. If Drake now was independent and said, I'm going to release a song, people would still buy it. So at that point, where is any new music they produce? That'd be theirs. Sure, they'd have legacy, and that might stick with the old record company, and I'm sure there's contracts in place to keep that nicely buttoned down. But anything new going forward, there's no reason why they wouldn't do that. And where does the line get drawn? Because we're talking about artists with lots and lots of money. But what happens to independent artists? And so this does actually open a really big conversation, because artists do rightfully deserve to get paid, and artists should own everything. Let's go back to the arguments that people like Prince have had, people like Taylor Swift have had very recently, about artists owning their work and being given their dues for their creative input, and in many instances their creative performances and all the input they're associated to. So the way in which everything's compensated these days has been affected by all of the knock-ons, such as music streaming, $1 for a music track, etc., etc. Now we get to the stage where music is getting put out free and generated by computers. So take some inspiration from this type of melody, this type of keyboard player, maybe this type of drum beat. Although lots of them out there would be trademarked and copyrighted, etc., you can only play so many chords. You can play so many notes. How many notes does a piano have? Well, it depends what size you have. How many notes are there on a fretboard? How many notes are there on a clarinet or a violin? There's only a bandwidth that you can operate in if you're playing an instrument and composing something. So through history, there are plenty of songs that have used the same patternation in the same way. The difference is it's maybe a different tempo. It's maybe a different melody that's accompanying with it, etc., etc. So it's almost using the same words, but in a different timbre or a different pacing. After all, music is a language, as we know. So this brings us into the AI aspect of it, because AI won't worry about that. It will just see modern music. These are songs that are popular. What was popular about them? Maybe it was this beats per minute. Maybe this type of tempo with this type of hi-hat or a snare drum. These type of keyboards or synth pads, etc. Maybe some vocal. Is it a male vocal? Is it female vocal? And AI would be able to analyze all of the information that's out there and then come back with just basic choices. So in many ways, what people have looked at as the pop industry, but bands that have been created, and there's plenty of rock bands, and obviously classical orchestras are made up of lots of individuals. So lots of these through history have been made by a selection process. So arguably AI is just doing the same thing. And if it is taking a snare beat and a kick drum beat and an E string on a guitar and a flat note on a keyboard or a violin, for example, those things that you can't trademark them. There's no way around it. They're just playing them all together. Now they can't obviously play exactly the same melody as something else, but it can be similar. And we've seen recently with Ed Sheeran. Did he copy a song? There are similarities, but did he hear it? No. Did he copy it? No. Are they the same? There's bits of it, but in the end, the judge pointed out it's arbitrary, but you can't really clamp down, I own this pattern of a song. You just can't do that. Because if you did, where does it end? Music would have a very finite window. Once we'd written down and claimed for ourselves all of the combinations of musical chord patterns, for example. Once whoever's done that, they own the rights to all music. How far does that go back? Chopin, Beethoven, people in the 80s, 70s when they're doing loads of experimental music. We would have had anything thereafter as being a clone. So there has to be some artistic license involved in these things. And I find it really, really interesting that such a big company would make a very big, bold statement. And in my view, it is purely on a protection of, as they've rightly pointed out, a musical ecosystem. And for once, I think there is merit to what they're doing. Because if they don't protect this ecosystem, effectively we could create some AI music and put it out there, and there'd be so much music that would be generated by computers, I won't say instantly, but without too much thought, that you wouldn't really need the human connection for it. And, you know, music is a language. And every song, regardless of genre, has a thought behind it. And there is something, but that's why people always connect with music. And it doesn't matter if you are talking something very tribal and very simple through to a very, very complex orchestral piece or a solo jazz piece or something in electronica. Any of these things, they all come from a place of humanity. They all come from a person or people or a team. So AI won't think that way. It will purely go by numbers. Does it mean there should be a category for AI music? Perhaps. Would it be great if you saw AI producers? Perhaps. Someone who could code these computers to look for the nuances and maybe use the computer to come up with patternation. Arguably, that's what we do when we get samplers. So, you know, where's the line? It's very grey, isn't it? But having something that takes music that's directly from artists, that's something that needs to be snipped straight off. And that's where I think it's right Universal jumped in on this, saying, you know, you can't do that because that will impact people. Fact remains though, having listened to it through, I won't play anymore, but if you go and have a look, it is a good tune. It is a good tune. There's no denying it. And that's, I think, what people were a bit scared of. We've all heard some of the demo things that you can have if you bought an old keyboard. Some of them are a bit cheesy, but there are others that instead of being a classic keyboard, it's actually a demo on a computer game or some sort of musical creation. And those things are, they're not the best. But this is really good. And I think that's part of the issue. The bigger issue is this would only get better. This will only get more refined as you get more people involved in it. And what it led us to think of here is, well, why don't we do it? What could we do? How would we create some music? So went online. How do you do AI music? And there's a couple of companies online that seem to be putting out how to do AI music and what you can do, and should real musicians get involved with these things? I think you could get some interesting stuff. But I thought it might be fun to try and just do this a little bit live for the next minute or so. So no idea what's going to happen. Absolutely no idea. But the first site we went on, it's called Soundful. Now this is a beta program. I have no idea what I'm doing here. we're going to go straight onto it, and it asks me to select a genre. So let's have some electronic dance music, some EDM. That sounds good. There's some options here. We've got chill step, deep house. I really should be thinking about more melodic techno. Or piano house. Let's go piano house. And then there's options just to create previews. So let's create a preview. Now, on my screen, on the screen itself, we have some strange options. And here we go. They've actually made some, it says unique track created. Let's see, here we go. Blimey. So I can slow this down if I want. Let's go a bit slower. That's 122 BPM. Let's do maybe 100. This is 120. Let's speed up a bit. 125. You can switch between major and minor. Wow. And you can also change the keys that it's in. So this is in C sharp, D flat. Let's try it in a B. Wow. Let's go F. Let's do these changes on the track and see what happens. Blimey, this is pretty impressive. I again, no idea what I'm doing. It could be completely using this wrong. Wow. So again, that's Soundful. Let's call this Piano EDM. It's just a random track. That is unbelievable. So what else we've got some ambience. Ooh, that's good, isn't it? I mean, let's put the candles on, get in the bath, have a nice chill, get a cup of coffee, sit out in the garden. Yeah. Wow. What else we got? It's got some lo-fi. I mean, this stuff's pretty incredible. And this is just one site. So very quickly, another site I came across was one called soundraw.io. And looking at that, you've got things like moods. What do you want to look at? Euphoric, epic, elegance. What type of genre do you want to have, for example? So let's pick an epic track. And let's see what we can come up with. There we go. I wouldn't say that's epic. But okay. It's different. Let's see what else there is. Okay, there we go. Sounds a bit more interesting. I mean, that's nice. You're not going to be upset with that, are you? Is it? again, doing something like I do here, simple backgrounds. Wow. I mean, to give you an idea, if you wanted to build something like this, you could quite easily build this yourself. But you have to put layers, you'd have to put some samples together, you'd have to make sure that you have the rights to those samples, etc., etc. All of these are using samples and they're all rights free, so you can use this at your will. Not just if you're a content creator, all those sort of things, but if you just wanted to make a nice video or something, or you could use this hold music, couldn't you, for just anything. It's pretty incredible that this is all just created AI tracks. You just type in what you want and it just builds up something. It's pretty impressive. I mean, I don't really know what other things you'd want to do. Like if you wanted to do something rocky, I guess that's maybe where I'd sit a little bit. So what would it come up with? Something rocky. Let's have a look. See. There we go. Didn't get the memo on that one. Oh, there we go. I mean, you could see this as there's something interesting too. A ska band, maybe, if you sped up a whole lot. Let's see if there's anything a bit more interesting. No. Yeah, I mean, it's okay, isn't it? It's not what we'd call rock, but I think it's just indicative of what is possible, and that's pretty scary. That's just AI. That's just something made up there. But that does show its limit. I mean, is that rock? No, that's not. You want something like Audio Slave, or you want something that's going to be a bit more face punchy, it's going to give you some energy. You don't really want little dinging bells and it sounding more like a excited elevator music or something. So yeah, I mean, there's your limit right there. So is AI going to take over and get musicians out of making music? Not really. Not at all, as far as I can see. But it does offer another tool. And I think that's something we need to maybe look at and embrace a little bit. It offers us another way to look at the music industry and say, hey, we could do this or we could do that. And the more tools, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Just being sympathetic with other artists and their music, I think that's a real important thing, which we have to be really, really aware of. So there will be refinements, and like everything, they're going to have to find legal loopholes and legal things of how does AI sample something that doesn't know it's not allowed to sample it? Because if you put restrictions on sampling things, what happens then? And do they have to hard code that in the music so it can't be sampled by anything? Or is it the responsibility of the sites like Spotify to not allow music or search engines like ChatGPT, for example, don't give it access so it can't go in there? But then what happens if the music's just offline? You can't stop it there. So it's a funny one, isn't it? It comes down to licensing. Universal want to protect their money. They also want to protect their assets, who are the artists. And in this instance, they're trying to do the right thing to protect the artists. So you have to respect them for jumping on something like this, because once you have one, other people realize it, etc., etc. But yeah, a really interesting topic, and I would love to hear from you all about this. And that brings me to the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. We're hoping to have another one out this week, and then 2 next week. But give us some feedback on what days are good for you as well. We're trying to work it out here, so we're moving the days around just to keep you all on your toes and keep you listening, but stay active with us. But until next time, wherever you are and whenever you're listening, we thank you so much. Take care.